Hey guys, Banana Lock here. Welcome back to another Watcher of Realms video. We're back on the test server today, and today we're gonna be running a bit more tests on Pierre, specifically which is the best gear set on him, and how does the inspiration work, because after my last video when went up, I realized that there are lots of people commenting that, maybe we should test this out further, and I did have my Discord friend reach out saying that, you know what, you're almost right. Just that that is actually not how Pierre interacts with inspiration, and you should try this instead. So yeah, that's what this video is for. First of all, we're gonna showcase again inspiration and how it works. And I'm gonna show you what's the right way and why what I previously assumed was the way that Prismarch recorded inspiration was actually incorrect. So you have here the guild boss on easy difficulty. So we're going to do the exact same test, but this time round, I'm going to show you what the difference is. Alright, so we're going to put Yao-Chan down first. Switch modes, and then after this, we're going to put down here. And there we go with Prismarch. So now I'm going to spawn it and let him do his hits, and let's see where we average out at when the first phase ends, especially when we have all the stacks built up from his passive as well. So we're looking at about 570k, if I'm not wrong. Once the boss recovers from the weakened phase, then we'll see it even more clearly. Yeah, 570 is the best. So now let's do a quick restart here. And what we did earlier was that we placed Yao-Chan down first before we placed down Pierre. Now what we're going to do in the reverse now is we're going to place Pierre down first. And we're going to wait for the summon to be out before we switch Yao-Chan here. And let's see the difference with Prismarch after we summoning him here. Because by my last video, the logic was that inspiration is recorded when Prismarch is summoned or placed onto the field. So by that logic, both of these placements that I just did should not make a difference, but let's see what we wind up in terms of damage. Can see 470, 480, 491. That's pretty much the maximum that we're gonna get to here. So why the big dip? That's because the way that I thought inspiration worked was actually different. So we'll just wait here for a second. Pierre is about to get his next ultimate, and whenever he does an ultimate without Prismarch present, he's gonna be able to summon him down again. So now he's gonna do that. We're gonna put him down, and we're gonna see that the damage is a lot higher now. We're actually gonna hit even higher than what we had previously. We're actually going to go up to 615. And the reason is very simple. Now, in our first test, we placed Yao-Chan down first. So when Prismarch was created, after Pierre was placed down, Yao-Chan's inspiration was not fully maxed out yet because it takes time for it to ramp up. So we got to about 570k. And then in the second test, to confirm what I said, we placed down Pierre first, then we placed down Yao-Chan after. You can see that the Prismarch wasn't boosted. But now that we resummon it, or when Prismarch was created, we're gonna see a lot higher damage, and we'll wait for this weakened phase to be over, and you can see that the max damage is actually at about 623k. So 623k with the max up Yao-Chan inspiration, 570 when we just spawned her from the start, and then without the inspiration it dipped to about 490. So that's how the inspiration works. Apologies if I confused you with the previous video, but this is how the interaction works. And with that all said, this changes things quite a bit when we want to think about gear sets options for him. So we're going to test that next. But before we go right into that, I want to test if Prismarch actually inherits the chaotic bonus. So how we're going to do that is right over here. We've been testing Prismarch with a cultist lot. I'm gonna switch it up to a chaotic lot instead. And let's see if that makes any difference here. So we're about 570k at the max previously, and 620 with the maxed out inspiration. So the thing is that I'm not sure if he will inherit the stats from the after the HP reduction or before, because he does reduce HP before he summons Prismarch. So I'm gonna do that here, and you can see that reduction there. And let's put Prismarch down, and we'll see what damage do we get to here. So it does seem like there is quite a big difference. We're seeing about 609k. And if let's say we were to despawn Prismarch here, that is maxed out inspiration. Let's see whether we get a bigger boost here. Doesn't seem like it's working correctly. 619. Yeah. Just now it was slightly higher, so we might have to wait for another round of ultimates before we make a conclusion here. Okay, he's almost down there. So now he's on minimum HP. We should be getting the maximum boost. There we go. The stacks build up here, we are at about 619k. So it's actually significantly lesser than what we had previously. So that's a bit of an interesting interaction. It could be that because of the movement speed slow and everything, the chaotic buff doesn't actually matter as much. But from the get-go, when we're doing it with Diao Chan's initial inspiration, it did look like chaotic buff was actually a lot better. But to answer the question of whether Prismarch actually is affected by the bonuses, it looks like they do, because without that we wouldn't have seen a damage difference, especially on counters versus chaotic. So yeah, with that out of the way, we're gonna test some gear sets now. Gonna set some baselines as to how the test is gonna be done before I showcase the results. So let's get into that. Now I was thinking, where's the best place that we can actually test out Pierre in a reasonable manner, and I figured that Matrix might be the place. So how we're gonna do it is that we're gonna place in Pierre and Rosalia on one side each, and we're gonna test him out in different gear sets. In this first test that we're gonna do, we're actually testing out him in House Lament, and we're gonna run him through 2 cycles. And after that, we're going to leave the game and see what damage do we actually get to there. And in each case, we're going to try to max out the stacks. So for Soma Arcana, we're going to have to cast 3 different spells before we place the rest of the units in. So let's see how that works out. We're going to place Wukong, Nerissa. And we're going to do Rosalia right over here. Yao Chan, switch modes. And I'm going to do Pierre on the side, after that with Eloin to boost him. And once we have that out, we're going to cast Prismarch down. And that's basically it. We're just going to let this auto for a bit and see where we get to in terms of the damage before we decide which is the best gear set for him. Now we're not going to run through the full 7 minutes, of course. We're just going to run through the first 2 cycles, and then after that we'll see how it pans out. Now we're going to put Rosalia down, ultimate down. Go. I'm going to get into another pack of silence in a bit here. I'm going to get into another pack of silence. Pass the ultimates, and yeah. Okay, 527, this is where we're going to stop right here. And you can see Pierre's damage stops at about 283 million here. So yeah, that's the same test we're going to run on the different gear sets, and we're going to see how that fares out. And yeah, let's get into that without further ado. Right, so we're back with the testing all finished up on Pierre, and we've ran the same test that I was just showing earlier 4 times, and we've swapped the gear sets across 4 different right side gear. You can see that I have it all saved here. The stats don't differ too greatly, so we have the health limit giving slightly higher crit damage, but other than that, you can see attack speed wise, we are pretty much at parity. So that's how I replicated the test. And then for Soba Arcana and Cataclysm specifically, I also did respawn of Prismarch after the first initial bit so that they can actually get the full Soba Arcana as well as the Cataclysm set. And the results are quite surprising. So I'm just going to bring it up in a bit here. So from top left to top right, we have the gear types ranked in terms of how good they are. So off the top of the list is obviously going to be Hell's Lament. I think there's no surprise here, given that Hell's Lament's fatal flaw is that if you can't keep the Hell's Lament set effect high enough uptime, then you sort of fall off because outside of the ultimate, you don't really get any bonuses. But with Pierre, when Prismarch can inherit the stats at the point where it's created, it sort of locks in the damage there, and that's the reason why we see it in the highest in terms of damage numbers. And then followed by that, we have Infernal Roar. So Infernal Roar is also doing pretty well. I think it's the same logic as what we have with Nora, where it inherits the stats at the point where it's created. So Infernal Roar just straight up gives the best damage there. And then after that, we have Soba Arcana trailing not too far behind because we did also do the resummon, so it sort of inherits the extra 50% after all the ultimates are casted. And Cataclysm is a very surprising one here at only 202 million. So I'm not sure if the testing, I did it wrongly somehow or somewhat, because I've done the test for Cataclysm actually 2 or 3 more extra times, and I just can't seem to bring the damage up no matter what I do. So I'm not exactly sure what happened there. And you're gonna see that Rosalia's damage in the bottom left-hand corner is actually significantly higher than the rest. The reason being is that we actually maxed out the ultimate quite a few times to build up that 5 stacks on Soba Arcana, way earlier than what we did on the other runs. So interesting results. I really didn't expect Cataclysm to come up at the bottom. I did also make sure that Hell's Lament and Cataclysm didn't have the Cultist faction rings active, so that we do not influence the test results in a certain manner for this tier 3 sets. But yeah, so that's the test. Hell's Lament obviously the best one yet, and then we have Infernal Roar, Soba Arcana, followed by Cataclysm, which is a surprise because in all the recent summoners that have been created, Cataclysm seems like the best set for them, so I'm not too sure what's going on there. Alright, so with that out of the way, we have done quite a bit of testing on Pierre to see what's the best way to run him, and the conclusion is obviously to run Hell's Lament and to re-summon his Prismarch, especially if there are cases where, inspiration has not ramped up yet. I think that's the best way that you can actually use him. And yeah, he is a very interesting unit. I just got a bit annoyed by how complicated it was to actually discover how this entire mechanics with Prismarch worked. And I was also quite surprised that in our test on the faction bonuses, the slow which gave crowd control effects actually winded up being a better lot bonus compared to, the chaotic faction buff. I'm very surprised about that, because chaotic faction buff actually gives 60% damage and 20% penetration. Now, penetration doesn't really matter that much in Guild Wars 1, I have to say, so maybe the test was a bit flawed. But I'm surprised that the 60% AoE damage there was actually less worthwhile than this 30% extra damage, as well as the 25% team members damage over here. The Curse Card one actually wind up being about 10k score higher, but I would say that it's pretty much at parity, especially if you add penetration into the mix. It is not that different. I just expected that the chaotic action buff would be a lot more significant. So that's it for the video. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you found that helpful because I did want to go back and do all this tests again to make sure that when the hero actually came out, you guys knew what was the best gear to actually slap on him. And in case you missed it, we are going to have a pool party for him as well as Rosalia next Saturday. So do sign up with the link below if you're interested. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to join my Discord or just leave it in the comments below. And as always, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, leave it down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.